Hello and welcome to Elvenhome, and to this edition where I carry on working in and around the area that will become the canal and the canal basin. I also show you some of the, all three now actually, of the buildings from MMR Models that I've bought for the timber yard. And I respond to two comments that I've had, one on an older video which came in yesterday, and another in response to my last video about scale speed, but more of that a bit later. First of all though, my version of the potter's wheel. As you can see in the previous clip, I decided to put in the embankment on this side of the viaduct, partly because it was making me nervous how I was going to do it, and I thought the better thing was to get on and do the thing. You'll have seen in the previous clip, it's a pretty standard way. I used card formers to give me a general shape, and then used paper to fill the holes. Now for some reason I've realised I decided to sort of do a cross between stuffing paper into the gaps and paper mache. Not sure why I'd put paste on all the individual pieces of paper, but once I'd got enough paper in to give me an overall shape, I then used plaster bandage to form the skin. And on top of that, I used some of the Woodland Scenics plaster that you put on the shaper sheet. But the beauty of that is it gives a nice skin which gets over the problems of the holes that you can get with plaster bandage. I've then painted it all with a Vallejo just flat brown, which is where it's going to stay for a little bit. I've started to put the wall edging that's going to go into here, and I'll then paint the tops to stop it looking white. But I've all the static grass I've got and the underbrush and the rest. I'm not sure it's quite right for what would be by a canal bankside. So I want to use my trip to York, which I'll definitely be going to now on the Saturday, because the train strikes have been Well, I don't think they were any actually called yet for that weekend, but because they've all been suspended, I will definitely be going down there for that, and take the opportunity to see what kind of scenic material is about that I might be able to use for the canal side. You'll also see that I've started painting the 2 canal barges. Just kept it pretty simple, really. That's just been done in a simple green and black, and this one red and black. When I get a moment, because I'm keeping myself quite busy at the moment, but when I get a moment, I'm going to have a go at doing some transfers, slide transfers, so that I can put names on the side of the cabins, because they were very highly decorated, these. But the first thing I've got to do is master Pixelmator Pro to be able to create the transfers in the first place. And I just need to settle down to do that. Not done much else in relation to this side beyond putting the plaster in and filling some of the gaps. And I think I'm going to paint that all the same flat brown to give me a similar base. But I want to think a bit about how I complete that section, because I'm still not wholly sure what I'm going to use to do the edging. I have cut a piece of the that I showed you last time from the thing from Vollmeyer, and I think I quite like that as right by the edge. Whether I think I do like that, actually, so I think that's what I'm going to do. That is about 4 or 5 foot wide, and that would be along the edge to form a kind of towpath right by the canal. I've also completed painting the lock itself. This, when you saw it last time, was just in grey primer. So I mixed up something as close as I could get to a kind of blue brick. This on camera here, it's coming out as just grey, but I assure you it is much closer to engineer's blue brick. And painted the sides of that. The top is simply stone grey. And then the bollards here are just painted white on top and black below. And then it's been given a good going over with black soot and light earth. And I also painted the gates. Well, I painted the gate tops black up to a point and then white at the ends. But the gates themselves, if I lift this up and bring them into focus, the gates themselves have only the primer and then weathering powders on them, which I've then, the whole thing has had a matte varnish put over the top of it. When I'd finished, or nearly finished, doing all this, I was looking at it and I was saying, there's something wrong, there's something missing. And it suddenly dawned on me when I was looking at various photos that I was using as reference material for the painting, that the 3D model as it comes has no barriers here to help people cross over from side to side. So I went into the Evergreen store to find my 0.5mm rod, bent a few pieces of that and stuck it on. It made a huge difference. I mean, I was astonished once I put those on, just the difference that it's made. But it's done the job, I'm pleased to say. And so that now is, I think, pretty much finished. It's in its position. I painted in here the same colour as I have now painted the baseboard, which is a brown colour that I got from B&Q, I think, but I think it's a Farrow and Ball colour. So it's a really high-class canal, this one, I tell you. And on top of the canal, you'll see there's a kind of greeny look to it. That is the... which one is it? It's the green moss weathering powder, which I mixed up with a water solution and as a kind of wash and just sort of painted it on. The next step will be to put the PVA in and get the PVA as the water base for the canal. And that will then complete that part of the work. Now, I have been doing something else as well, which is why you've not seen over the viaduct, which I will come and talk to you about after the next section, because I mentioned some models that I'd bought for the timber yard, and I showed you one of them, and I thought it would be quite useful to actually show you me building one of the models so you get an idea. Now, one thing I should say is that the clip that I'm doing now I recorded some time ago, about a week or so ago. When I went onto MMR Models website just to check that it was still there, it is still there, but everything they've got is out of stock at the moment. Now, I don't know whether that's because they're away doing exhibitions or what. I hope it's just that that's all it is. They've been away doing exhibitions. But I really like these models, and I really do hope that the company will have stuff back in stock again soon. So with that caveat, let's take a look at me building one of the MMR models. You may recall in the last video that I mentioned that I'd got 3 kits from MMR Models, model kits, which is a triple pack that they do. You can buy them individually, but they sell them together at a slightly discounted price for a timber yard. And that I built the first of those buildings, which is the sawmill, which is this one here, which I'll move out the way now because I don't need that. And now I'm going to build the blower plant, sanding house and office. And I thought what I would do is, rather than just show you the finished article, is show what the kit is like and me putting it together as best I can, working under the camera. I have already taken the stage of doing the painting. It's recommended that you do the painting before you put it together. As you can see, there is an internal section of the model. And then to that, the exterior decoration and walls are put on. The painting here is pretty simple. This is a mahogany brown, Vallejo mahogany brown, which I've used for the doors. I then added some orange to the mahogany brown to give me a slightly redder texture for the brickwork. And the wooden upper section of the exterior I painted again. It's the standard thing, natural wood, Vallejo natural wood, over which I have used the dark smoke and light earth powders. The window edges have all been put round in off-white, and they also got a bit of weathering on top of them. This is London grey, which I've used before. I'll see how it looks, but I do have some of the Redutex slates. But I think everything I've got is slightly smaller slates, which will probably look wrong, which I might put on there, but I'll see. I'll see how that comes when we put it all together. The internal carcass has been painted up. The roof supports, because I'm going to have the doors open, will be visible. I hope, if I can, to put a light in. I'm not sure whether I will be able to do it because there's no internal floor, I don't think. Anyway, we'll see what it comes out like when it's done. The windows have all been painted so that when they show through, you don't see any grey card. And they've also, as recommended, had glue and glaze put into them. Now I'm going to bring this up to, oh yes, you can. You can see the effect that the glue and glaze, if I turn it on its back, you'll see this more. This is the deluxe glue and glaze, which is a PVA, but it's one that really does dry clear. And I think it gives you a fantastic representation of old window glass, which would be good for a building of this age. So all I've got to do is put it together. I will stop talking now, and I shall probably bring up some music, and I will cut the next bit. You're not going to sit for the half hour or so or more that it may take to complete the construction. But what I will do is cut from sections once I see what the completed footage looks like. So I will speak to you again when I have a completed blower plant. Well, there you can see the completed building. Fairly straightforward to put together. I had the usual interesting time with the rocket card glue. Those of you that use rocket card glue will know that it is the stickiest thing on earth, except when it doesn't want to be. And on a number of occasions, it simply refused to stick things together. However, all been overcome. And so we now have the sand blower. Now, I don't pretend to understand what on earth would be inside this building. Whether I light it or not, I'm not sure. The inside is pretty bare, as you can see. Well, that wouldn't be hard. I could easily paint that dark colour. That's not an issue. But I do need to find out what on earth would be inside the thing. But that now does at least give us 2 of the 3 buildings. So I'm on my way to having a working timber yard with those 2 in place. And the final one is the timber store itself, I think. So I may or may not film that, we'll see. But that was just to show you this model going together. I'm really impressed with MMR Models, well worth going and having a look at. And I do hope, as they said when I was at Worley, that they will produce more of their 00 gauge models down in N scale. Okay, that brings this section, I think, to a close. As you can see, I've completed the 3rd of the buildings and all 3 are now sitting on the layout. They're sitting very neatly line abreast. I'm not sure that's actually where they're going to go, because I've got to determine where the road comes down from here first of all, and what the landform's going to be like. It's likely most of this side will be the timber yard, so how I actually position the buildings we'll wait and see. But I thought I'd show you all 3 of them together. The 3rd building was in many ways the more intricate to make. The little office here is made up of an inner carcass on which external walls are then fitted. Let's make sure I've got this in frame. Aha, there we go. That's a bit better. Let me move that down a bit. Right, this is the third time I've done this, and the last 2 times I realised that I had this off of camera and you couldn't see it. So, third time lucky. The main sections here, there's 3 that are completely laser cut with 7 struts that go to bring the 3 together. And then the exterior walls and the front and the back go on. The roof is just card. If you look underneath, you can see it's just card, which they suggest you put around a rolling pin or something to sort of stretch it, which I did. It occurred to me I was going to paint it, but I've had unfortunate consequences with card when it just gets painted. And I bought a while ago several sheets of very fine grit sandpaper, partly to think of using it possibly for the surface for the gasworks. So instead, that's a piece of 2000 grit sandpaper, if I put that there, which is a nice grey colour, and I thought I'll leave that alone. So I've stuck that on the top, and I'm really quite pleased with it. It may get a dusting of weathering powders, which is the only thing it hasn't received yet. The painting of this was only the light brown again, and then plenty of work with more light earth than dark soot this time. But it obviously using the same general approach so that it blends with the other buildings that are in their position there. You'll also see that this section now, I've put cork down, and this will show you this is the canal basin as it's going to be. The road is in its place. I've not stuck that down yet, but I will do. Interestingly, when I put this in, for a reason that I simply cannot fathom, because it's level where it should be here, where it measures up on the other side, it's a bit low. Now, as far as I'm aware, the thicknesses of the various foam board that I've got are exactly the same. So why it's doing that, I don't know. And I was worried about how I would get the slope up and how I was going to have to slope it up on the top until, of course, the obvious thing to do is not try and do that. Just lift the feet up underneath here. So a piece of cork has gone in there to bring that level. And that actually means there's a gentle rise going up to the level crossing. I've put in here, it's a placemaker. I'm not actually going to be using that, but to give me an idea of how much space I might need to get a winding path. I think I do actually want it to be more the embankment coming down to about here and the path then winding maybe 2 or 3 times and maybe taking a bit of a longer length to make the journey down, but we'll see where that comes from. But that's what the canal basin is going to look like. And as I think I said in the previous one, the last thing I've got to do now is to get the edging on for this. Probably again painting this. I suspect I will paint it the same natural earth and then decide how I'm going to what I'm going to use as the base. I'll have a think about that. And then we get the PVA on, and I hope by the time of the next video that you will indeed get to see the PVA. One other job that is waiting for me at some point, you can see these wires sort of laying all over the place, which provide the power. Some provide the power for the track. These here are coming off the bus to provide the power for the track. This is the very end of the DCC bus, which was used to provide is used to provide the power up to High Elvenhome when those boards go on. And then I've got here, which comes off the lighting bus, which provides the power to those lights that are not fitted into the just plug system. However, they're in the wrong place. So at some point, they've all got to be redone. I know how I'm going to do that, but I'm not going to do it just yet. But that does need tidying up. And also I need to think a bit about how High Elvenhome is going to sit on here and whether it's going to be the same shape as I had it, or whether I'll try a different way of putting in the mountain face or the rock face down from High Elven to the canal and its basin, and go for a different way of putting the board on. Lots to think about there, but we'll see. So that brings you up to date completely with where I am with the canal. And as I say, hopefully when I get back from York, I'll have the materials to start doing the scenic work over this side of the viaduct, down for the embankment and around there. And get, as I said, main thing, get the PVA in so that it's got the kind of watery effect. I've been doing some experiments with that, and I think that's going to work fine enough for me. I don't need to have some deep water glossy effect, because it is really just a dirty old canal. That, I think, brings us up to speed here. Let's go to a running session, and then there's one more thing which arises out of something I was suggested to me after the last video, of another way in which you might be able to do scale speed. So we'll come back to that after the running session. Well, I hope you enjoyed that running session. The running session, in part, was inspired by someone who commented on one of my older videos yesterday about seagull, and they wanted to look at the synchronization between the chuffing sounds and the wheels. But in the video where I showed that, which I think was episode 117, I had some music playing underneath, which I often do with running sessions, but I haven't done this time, and I hope, Kite, that gave you enough for you to be able to see. There are CV settings you can use to adjust the number of chuffs per revolution of the wheels. From what I picked up looking at BRM, there should be 6 chuffs per revolution of a wheel, And I think that's what my A4 is doing. But by all means, people have a look at that and tell me if you think that's right. And I might go in and risk fiddling with the CVs again. Also, in response to my last video, you may remember that I was talking about scale speed and a website which does the calculation for you essentially, providing you measure the train travelling over a set distance or a known distance. And in response to that, Rodney Bates came back and said that on Zimo decoders, including the ones that Bachmann use under their brand, there is a setting, a CV setting, that allows you to calibrate the chip so that the speed step on your controller equals 1 kilometre or 1 mile per hour, depending how you calibrate it. So that sent me scurrying off to the manual for my Zimo chips. I think now all my Zimo chips are MX617s. Now they're being discontinued and a new load of chips are coming in, which is, I imagine, one of the reasons why we can't buy them for love nor money. But on this standard 4 tank, there's a Zimo chip in there. So I thought I'd have a go. And I scurried off to the manual. Now, I think Ian mentioned on one of his recent videos, and these are things you know, but don't think you need to share because you think everybody will know. The manufacturer nearly always has a manual, and in that manual there is an awful lot more information about the chip than anything they print on the packet that it comes in, because they're normally quite small. And so on the Zimo website, I've got a link in the description to the Zimo website. You can find the manual for every chip they've ever made. And that is true of the MX series. And they both, for their non-sound and sound decoders, the chips MX600 to MX638 have one manual. And that also includes sound decoders MX640 to MX660. And on page 23, if I bring this up here and put it into the camera, it tells you how to go about calibrating the speed of the locomotive to equal one speed step equals 1 kilometre or 1 mile per hour. The difference in whether it's kilometres or miles per hour is only the difference over which you measure its speed. And so what it asks you to do is to do a calibration run, and you set a CV, you switch a CV on, and you use the F0 function, which is usually turning the lights on and off, much like I did with the website. So I press F0 when it reaches the start of my measured distance. I press F0 when it reaches the end of my measured distance. And that distance, I can't remember what the figures were now. The distance then can be converted into whether it's miles per hour or kilometers per hour. So what was the distance that I used? I can't remember. I think it was I used 1 meter. That's right. I used 1 meter. And if you measure it over 1 meter, whatever comes out there will be kilometers per hour. I had to use a smaller figure for miles per hour, which I think was 641 or 647 millimeters. In the description below, because I can't for the life of me remember what number I used, I will put the figure so that you know. Once you've done that, you then switch another CV to say, right, that's what I want, and everything should be hunky-dory. Well, it wasn't quite. What it was that the calibration worked, because I measured the standard 4 travelling at 40, 50 and 60 miles an hour, or 40, 50 and 60 on the speed steps, and sure enough, the scale speed website showed them doing 40, 50 and 60 miles an hour respectively. The only problem was it completely screwed up other settings that I'd put on the decoder. Now that may just have been unlucky, but the active brake stopped working and the deceleration and acceleration stopped working, but it may be that the combination doesn't work very well and I need to do some more research. But if you just had a basic decoder, this would be a way of regulating the speed of locomotives just through the decoder. So go and have a look at your manual and see if there's anything similar if you don't have a Zimo chip. But if you do have a Zimo chip, as I said, I'll put a link to the Zimo sites generally, because it's useful to have that site, but specifically to the manual for the chip that I'm using. So that, I think, brings together another action-packed episode of Elvenhome. Please, if you've got any comments, please do let me have your comments. They're really just so useful. As you've just seen, a comment from Rodney has set me off looking at things that the CVs were able, by using CVs I was able to do, which was really useful. If you've liked the video, well, do give it a thumbs up. That's always very helpful. And if you haven't subscribed already, well, please do subscribe, because it really would be great to have you along. But I think now, until I see you in about a fortnight's time, sorry, I had a knock at the door just at the inopportune moment. I was just about to say, until I see you again in about a fortnight's time, that's goodbye from me. Bye-bye.